Saw an old man in a veteran's hat at the service station pumping his gas. Pulled up beside him, blaring beside.
Hello and welcome to Telling It Like It Is, UGA Extension and Southeast District's newest source for local, unbiased, research-based information about Georgia's number one industry, agriculture. As always, you have your hosts for this episode are myself, Blake Carter, the Effingham County Ag and Natural Resources Agent, and Savannah Tanner, the Emmanuel County Ag and Natural Resources Agent.
Hey guys.
Now, Savannah, we're going to start a little bit this podcast a little different. We normally would have two sets of speakers, but you're going to get first half of this episode is going to be me and Savannah. We both have some really good headlines to kind of talk with everybody about, and then we've got a special guest from North Georgia, one of our wildlife enthusiast agents is coming on to talk a little bit about bats and you might be thinking that's a weird thing, but it's September 30th right now, and spooky season is upon us, so I figured that was pretty on brand. So we're going to kind of get started, and I've got a big headline for Georgia agriculture today coming out, and Savannah, me and you, we can kind of share some of our thoughts. But USDA has agreed to the $531 million block grant with the Georgia Department of Ag to help producers recover from Hurricane Helene. And this was reported this morning coming out of Department of Ag. And this is a targeted relief for on-farm economic losses and damaged infrastructure and timber impacts from last year.
So Blake, my understanding with that is it's a large number, but it's a relatively small amount for it to be spread across. So it's only 14 states. There were some things that rolled out earlier in the year that was all 50 states, but my understanding is this one is kind of contained across 14 states, which is kind of hopeful, at least for Georgia producers here.
You're exactly right, and the program details, eligibility criteria, all that stuff will be published on their website, or is published on the website. But it boils down to timeline matters here. The announcement was today. The state and the USDA are buttoning up the paperwork now. Producers should watch GDA's channels, or I know Farm Bureau has reported on it. Some of these other farm monitors and farm news networks in Georgia, any of those resources, they're probably going to be reporting on this. This is a pretty major significant deal. So make sure you're checking those out for more details. Local outlets are also reporting the figure again, tied specifically to the Helene recovery there.
So with some of these programs, a lot of times they're just disaster related, and that doesn't necessarily just have to be Hurricane Helene or any of the other hurricanes or tropical storms. It could also include significant amounts of rainfall. It can include drought, which I actually think in some of these states that it's listed, that is the weather concern, was the significant drought. And I can tell you, as far as this year goes, we could really be hopeful and hopefully get a package for 2025. But this particular one is during the 2023 and 2024 seasons.
And I think it's good to reiterate what producers could really be doing right now. I mean, keep your documents like you had last year. If there, God forbid, there's another storm, keep records indicating everything. Keep your paperwork. Be in contact with the FSA office, USDA. Make sure you're got every bit of your reporting ready to roll, no matter when they ask for it, to make it just a streamlined process. Stay plugged into to your different local outlets for information. That's your local FSA or GDA, and then this block grant really could help cover not just the damage to structures, but really that the impact it had on crops for us. And I think that's the big thing. Growers are really just we needing it, and we're so thankful that this is happening. The bottom line, there are dollars coming in for Georgia's farm and timber communities after Helene. We really are just encouraging y'all to keep your records tight, watch for GDA, coordinate with your county extension and FSA teams, so you're ready to roll. and we'll keep we'll keep tracking the fine print and share how to once the states post any more of the application details, and we'll keep you in the know. So we're going to kind of switch gears. Nope,
Well,
Savannah, what you
well,
got?
Blake, hang on just a second. One of the things that I've learned as the operator of, or one of the main operators of Redman Farms, but then also as a county extension agent, is there is so much importance in record keeping. And I mean, we say that from a pesticide side of things regularly, but we don't always think about some of these programs. But I mean, you're talking about all the way back to 2023, and I can tell you between Hurricane Helene and 2025, it's easy to get mixed up on what happened from year to year. So it is critical that we're keeping those records for several years, because just like last year in 2024, Dad got a payment for some forages from well on back into 2021. And so we certainly don't remember what happened in 21, 3 or 4 years later. So I do want to emphasize that record keeping. And but we are going to, like Blake mentioned, start swapping gears. Drought is one of those things that are covered in some of these programs, but kind of brings us to a point. I have some places in Emmanuel County that it's been the latter part of July since we've gotten some rain, significant rains. We may have gotten a couple of tenths here and there, but a measurable amount of rain in several places. And with that type of dry weather just throws off a lot of things. Cotton maybe doesn't progress quite as well. Peanuts certainly don't progress as well as they should. And dry land corn at the tail end of it kind of got hit hard in some of the late planted stuff. Soybeans are getting hit hard, and one of the things with harvest season comes a lot of questions for county agents in regard to feeding crop residues and crop stubble, and maybe even baling some of those things. And there are a few things that, as somebody that does and handles a lot of forages, that I do want to pinpoint that we should be looking at. One of the things that I think of first is pesticide label restrictions. And so one of the things I think of is fungicides. And so whether it's corn stalks or peanut hay or whatever that may be, we use fungicides that are not labeled for, in some fields, that are not labeled for livestock and forage consumption. So it's very critical that you're talking to maybe your producer or know what you're putting out on your farms prior to feeding or grazing those crop residues, to make sure that you're following that label, because at the end of the day, that label is law. So make sure that you realize that. The other thing that comes with some of these is nitrate accumulation. And so one of the big ones that I think about with nitrates is dry land corn. So a lot of times, one of the questions I get when maybe we've got a dry land corn crop that maybe didn't do as well is, can we graze it? Can we have cows graze it? And so the thing with that is, we've already put a lot of nitrogen most likely into that. And if we've not received a significant amount of rainfall, then our nitrates can be pretty heavy in that. And nitrates will kill a cow pretty quickly. So we really want to watch those. We can send off those samples. Waters Lab does it. UGA Lab does nitrates. And just want to emphasize the importance of taking those samples and reading into those and knowing what we have before we feed. Another thing that we don't always think about, because they are traditionally not nitrate accumulating, and is legumes. And so soybeans, peanuts, alfalfa, things like that fixate their own nitrogen naturally. That's the big beautiful thing about them being legumes, is that they're going to put some nitrogen back in the soil. And traditionally, we do not have to worry about significant nitrate accumulation from those plants. But in times of stress, like drought, like frost, those plants will actually start accumulating some pretty heavy nitrates. So we really want to emphasize the importance of looking at that. One of the other things that I think of is alpha toxins, whether that's corn, whether it's sorghum, wheat, oats, uh, cottonseed, peanuts, soybeans. Soybeans not as much, but they can accumulate alpha toxins in places where we get dry weather and then get rain. And alpha toxins are essentially molds, and those molds can create and generate some toxins into them that can be dangerous for cows. In severe situations, we can see abortions and even death, but a lot of times we'll just see sick animals. If you have dairy animals, the milk will test positive for alpha toxins, and they will actually reject those loads for you. So that's something I think is very important to look at in regard to that. Any kind of crop residue, whether you're baling or grazing. Another thing that honestly I just have learned in the last few weeks is quality. And I've always known that quality is so variable in some of these crop residues. Um, you know, one year you'll send it off and you've got rocket fuel, and the next year you got something that needs to be sold to the DOT. So I've always known that quality is completely variable, just dependent on the crop year as far as these row crops go. One of the things I didn't know was how important the ash content is in these baled forages. And so, to put it in perspective, our Bermuda grass hay traditionally has about 4 or 5% ash. So, ash is essentially the soil contamination in the grass. And with some of these baled crop residues, you can see like 14 and 15% ash content. And so to put that in perspective, if we have a product that tests 10% ash and that animal is consuming, let's say 30 pounds a day, which is what a lot of our mama cows will be consuming of that product, 3 pounds of that is dirt in their gut. And so that's going to significantly reduce quality. That's going to significantly reduce maybe the health of that particular forage. And then on the other side of that, they've got 3 pounds of dirt in their gut, essentially. And so that can cause impaction and things like that. So the other thing is baling some of these, whether it's cotton stalks, corn stalks, whatever it may be. Some of these things, when you start removing those products from the land, you're going to start removing large amounts of fertilizer. And so at one point in time, I think about it, if you remove the peanut vines from a peanut field, you're looking at like $92 worth of fertilizer that you have taken off of that land. And now, cows are certainly what's bringing in the money right now. But when you start talking about the nutrient removal from that land, there's certainly a price that you're going to pay to remove that. And so that was a big, long spiel. And really the take home from all of it is get with your county agent, make a feeding plan, but also with cows being as expensive as they are. So one of the things that I also have put together recently is the newest carrying cost for a cow, just an average situation. Dr. Will Secor worked to try to finalize this number, is about $1,350 a year is what you have to pay to keep that animal on farm. Well, when calves are bringing, $4 a pound plus some in a lot of situations, it's very much so worth making sure that our animals are staying healthy and that we're keeping them at a bare minimum alive and productive. And so getting with your county agent, sending off the samples, a basic forage sample is going to tell you the nitrates, it's going to tell you the quality. And then, at some labs, you may have to ask for ash or alpha toxins. to be running those, but it'd be very much so worth knowing kind of what you what you're seeing. So just some food for thought when it comes to grazing crop stubble and crop residue.
And I think
So,
it's really timely for this time for us right now. And I've been seeing some of the bellage of the peanut residue. Um, and I've been seeing that in some of the fields after these guys are getting done with their peanuts. And um, I have a question for you, Savannah. When if you're a farmer that is a peanut farmer, let's say, and if you're wanting to think about giving out that residue or giving that to somebody, is that okay to do? Is there rules around that? What would be the right path to do that the right way?
all of that depends on those fungicides, the usage and the way that you handled the production of that crop. So you again always want to follow the label, the
Mhm.
pesticide labels, whether that's fungicide, whether it's herbicide, insecticide. You would want to make certain that you are following those labels.
So you
So
make a good point. So if you're a row crop guy and you don't have cows and you're thinking about, you have somebody, I've had this happen in our county where a cattle guy approaches a row crop guy and says, "Can I get the residue after you're done?" Is that something they should have had that plan in place in their head of what their chemicals are, picking that to make sure it's safe, or is that something that can be a spur of the moment end of the season, like, hey, I did spray these, but we read the label, it was okay.
to be honest, if I was, I don't think it makes economic sense. I also don't think it makes soil health sense to remove those vines from the field in the event that you don't have your own cattle.
Okay. That I
Um,
appreciate that. And that's a good. I want that to be a point because I think I've seen that in our county in F&M where that's a common trend of folks asking some of the row crop guys, and then I'll get calls of saying, like, should I even sell this? Is this even good quality? Like, so I think that's really
and
good points.
I think you have to weigh all of those. I think you have to weigh all of the things that I've already talked about. You
Yep.
have to weigh the economics and what you're removing um, from the soil, from that land if you bale it. You have to look at the quality, the nitrates, the alpha toxin, the chances for all, you have to weigh all of that stuff before you make the decision to remove. And it's not just peanuts, it's cotton, it's corn stalks, it's all of that. Those byproducts are so important to be left on the field. Now, one of the byproducts that we use and feed regularly that I would feed over just about anything is cottonseed, and that's one of those things that you remove automatically. It's not like you're actually pulling that from the land. Same thing, one of the things I think about is corn. But when you start talking about the actual vegetative growth, the cotton stalks, the corn stalks, things like that, you're starting to remove a lot of good things that need to stay in the soil that can help you actually minimize some of your fertilizer cost in the long run.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the segment, and we're kind of gonna wrap up to our last part of our episode and bring in our guest. So I'm
So
gonna
the
kind of
the
go ahead.
I'm gonna preface this new speaker into saying it is spooky season, and it's very much so been a very spooky harvest season. And so we have Carsen Dean with us. She's going to talk about bats, which is pretty spooky in and of themselves. So, but as far as our farmers go, you guys stay safe, and let's try to get through this spooky season of harvest. So.
It's been tough, but prayers and thoughts are with each and every one of our farmers during harvest, and uh, we'll continue to support and pray for a good finish out of the year. So let's go ahead and turn it over to Carson Dean then. Today we have a exciting segment that we're going to kind of focus on. It's a little bit different than our normal row crop focus that we normally do this time of year, but we have that. We've already talked about that with Dr. Porter. And now we're going to kind of switch gears and we're going to talk a little bit about bats. And you might be like, what? But it's September. It's getting close to spooky season if you celebrate. For me, it's when pumpkin spice comes out on the market, and that is now. So it's technically spooky season. Spooky season comes with bats and skeletons and all kinds of other things. So we thought this would be a perfect time to talk about bats. So when we thought about that, me and Savannah said, who would be the best bat person to talk to? And you might be like, Batman? No, it's actually Batwoman. And we have chose our resident wildlife guest on the
Expert.
show, Carsen Dean from Oconee County. Carsen, thank you for joining us today.
Nice to be here. And bats have something to do with row crops too, because they help protect our row crops from pest issues. So it kind of is still in the same realm, even though it's spooky season.
That is true, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that because I think that's the cool thing about bats. People don't really realize how useful to the ecosystem they really can be. A lot of times people associate bats with being scared, or they don't want to be around it because rabies and all that kind of stuff. But bats play a really important part of our ecosystem. I've seen the benefit of them. If you have a pond and you battle mosquitoes, you know firsthand how great bats can really be for you in your area. Now, if bats are in your ceiling or in your attic, that's a problem. But bats can be good. So Carsen, you mentioned about agriculture, and let's start with that. So how can bats really be a player and help farmers?
So then, to answer that, I got a question for you, Blake. I want you to name a pest of a crop.
Not the jacid. Not the
I was
jacid.
going to say my nightmares are filled with that jacid right now. Let's go with stink bugs.
Stink bugs, you got stink bugs, you've got army worms. What do army worms turn into? Moths, right? Pretty much a lot of our pests for our crops are either flying insects or turn into flying insects, depending on their life cycle. And bats in Georgia, we have 16 species of bats in Georgia, and every single one of them is an insectivore. Every single one of them is eating insects. And bats are experts at flying insects. It depends on the species. Some of them prefer things like moths. Some of them prefer beetles. Some of them, the smaller guys, are mosquito hunters, those types of things. But you have 16 different species of bat that span across the state of Georgia who are eating upwards of 1,000 insects a night, depending on the species and depending on the size of the bat. So if you have a colony of 50 bats living in a house somewhere, not in a person's house, but in a bat house, you're looking at 50,000 insects eaten a night, right? Wow. And you span that over their hunting season, which is going to be during the spring up through the fall, which is our crop season, right? You are looking at, in a couple of months, you are looking at hundreds of thousands, if not millions of insects eaten in just a small group of bats. Female bats who are nursing, because they are mammals, so they nurse their young, are going to be eating exceptionally more insects than other bats because they need to produce that milk to be able to feed their young. So if you have a nursing colony nearby, they're going to be clearing house trying to get rid of those insects. They're nighttime hunters. They're coming out at night trying to eat those insects. And so when you have a beneficial species like that who is eating thousands and thousands and thousands of potentially harmful insects that could be damaging our crops, you're saving the farmer. They did the math, and it's billions of dollars a year in the United States in this pest management service. And that also means you don't have to pay for pesticides. We don't have to be reliant on pesticides as much. It's an organic option, which is great. And it helps reduce our pesticide load because we're relying on a species that's already here, that is extremely beneficial, that's trying to help us anyway by just trying to get rid of our pests. So I think overall, bats are one of those things where they're severely misunderstood. The media has, it's gotten a little bit better now, but, decades past and generations past, media has done a great job turning bats into the villain. I kind of say some animals are popular because they just have a really good PR team, and bats just didn't have a good PR team. We're trying to improve it a little bit, but we're slowly trying to get people to understand that with bats around, not only are the farmers better and the industry better because we're saving money, but just people in their backyard wanting to sit outside in the summer in Georgia and not get eaten alive by mosquitoes, or go fishing and not get eaten alive by mosquitoes, or having your own personal garden and not having it destroyed by insects. Bats are going to be one of your best friends.
Well, I think part of the issue with bats is that they're not cute. So you have certain animals that do have their PR team, and these guys are just not cute.
It is the definition of cute. What is your definition of cute? If you can find a pug cute, you're going to find a bat cute.
I was going to say,
they have those
the pug effect.
Smushed
I don't
faces,
think a pug
the
is
big
cute,
ears. But so like people who find pugs cute, people who find that kind of so ugly they're cute factor, bats, and it's not all bats are like that, right? So there are two main groups of bats. We have our micro bats, which is what we have here in Georgia, which is the really little guys, the ones that eat insects. And those are our smush face guys, the ones with the big ears, the ones that use echolocation to find their food and find their way around. And then you have your macro bats, your big guys, right? So these are things like your flying foxes. They're over a lot of times in the old world, over in like India or Southeast Asia, those types of areas. And those are our fruit eaters. And they look like foxes. They have the big muzzle, smaller ears, big eyes, because they hunt during the day because their fruit is not going anywhere. So they don't have to echolocate to find their food. But bats come in so many different shapes and sizes and colors and facial structures. They cover everything from fruit eating, which is seed dispersal, to pest management, which is insect eaters or insectivores here in Georgia, to pollinators. So some bats, especially in Southwest United States and down into Mexico, are really big on nectar pollination. If you're an adult over the age of 21 and you've ever enjoyed a margarita, tequila, agave, that's because of a bat. Bats are one of our main pollinators for agave. So those are big guys.
They might be getting cuter.
Yes.
In the grand scheme.
If you drink enough margaritas, they definitely would be cuter. I hear that word. I'm not promoting that. I'm just saying.
Once you start learning about bats and how much they benefit us, I think they really start getting cuter for most people. The only kind of ecological niche that they don't fill is that of like a vulture, like a carrion eater. They don't eat dead things. And there are vampire bats. That is a thing, but there's only 3 species of them, and they're not found here. They're found in South and Central America. And they don't really want human blood. They want cattle blood. They want horse blood. They want large animal blood because it's really easy to find them. And they don't move. Then they're outside and they're sleeping outdoors.
You're telling me where Dracula was born, they don't have vampire bats?
No, they do not.
So do you think instead of Transylvania, he came from South America? I wonder about that. That's crazy.
I don't know. But yeah, so you're not gonna, if you find a bat in Georgia, unless someone was keeping a vampire bat as a pet, as you know, which you shouldn't do. Bats are not good pets. You're not gonna run the risk of being vampired. Like you're not gonna turn into a vampire if you get bit by a Georgia bat, because we just don't have them here. Not that you should get bit by a Georgia bat, because now we have other
turn
issues.
into a vampire if I was bit by a South American vampire bat?
No, you won't.
I just want to clarify that for the people on here. I just want to make sure.
No.
It's not just Georgia bats. It's all bats. You won't turn into a vampire.
It's all bats. You're not going to turn into a vampire. You get bitten by a bat, but there are bats in the world that do consume blood as their food source, but they're not found here. And even if you were in an area that they were, you're not their first meal of choice. They're going for something like a cow.
Well, it kind of going along with, I know I'm being kind of silly with the Dracula thing, but going with the myth of bats, right? Because you talked about the PR team being pretty not great. Can you talk a little bit and kind of bust some of these myths that surround bats?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I think of people get scared of what they don't know the truth about. So can you talk a little bit about like the rabies and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we covered bats don't turn you into vampires. They're not trying to suck your blood. Second off, bats do carry rabies, but less than 1% of bats in the wild are thought to have rabies. So it's it's one of those things where yes, bats have rabies. It is something that we want to be careful about. If you have to handle a bat, for example, if you find a bat in your house and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you can't get anybody out there to go take it out, you need to take certain precautions. Make sure you're wearing thick leather gloves, a towel around the bat if you need to, trying to make sure that you're not making physical contact with your skin with that bat. Bats here in Georgia, their teeth are very small, so sometimes you might not even notice if they bite you. And so we want to make sure that our skin is not in contact with the bat at all while we're working on it, if we do have to just get it out of our house. If you have a larger colony of bats, you might need to call a professional. Georgia Department of Natural Resources is who you want to call to help find someone to remove those bats for you. But less than 1% of bats in the wild are thought to have rabies. The issue with rabies and the reason why bats are considered one of the main rabies vector species for humans is because of the way that rabies presents itself in bats and the way that we react to it. So when you picture rabies in your head, you might think the foaming at the mouth, the aggressive behavior of like a dog who has rabies or a raccoon who has rabies, and they're charging at you and trying to attack you. Bats don't do that. They're not going to swoop at you and try to bite you that way. That's not what happens. What happens is they get sick, they don't feel good, and during the day they fall out of their roost or they end up on the ground. And people don't see bats during the day. Not here in Georgia. All of our bats are nocturnal here. So if you see a bat on the ground during the day at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, your instinct is going to be something must be wrong with that bat. It must be injured. It must have fallen. So as humans, our instinct is to help. So we want to pick it up. We want to help it, maybe take it back. Kind of like if we found a baby bird and we want to put it back where it belongs. But the issue is when a bat is displaying those behaviors of being out during the day, being on the ground, being unable to help itself, that usually means that animal is either sick or injured. And so people wanting to help pick up a bat and they get bit. And then it's a situation where even if that bat didn't have rabies, let's say it was just injured, like its wing was broken, we still have to test that bat for rabies to make sure that the human doesn't have rabies now. And unfortunately, that test, we don't have a better way of doing it. It is fatal to that bat to be able to test for rabies. But because the rabies in bats is so much more subdued in terms of how they behave, we see an injured animal, we want to help it. We don't expect it to then have rabies because in our heads, we picture rabies as this big, like, foaming at the mouth, crazy, coming at you thing, and bats just don't do that. And so usually that's how people get rabies or potentially might come in contact with rabies, is through a bat because of the fact that they're so small, so unassuming, and they're behaving in a way that's not normal for them. The other thing is bats, like I said, are really small. Their teeth are really small. Their bites are really small. So if you're in a situation where you're camping outdoors or if you have bats in your house or something and they find their way into your house where you're sleeping, you might not know that they're there. There, have been instances where people have taken blankets out of their closets that haven't been opened and folded out in months, and a bat had fallen from the attic into that space and gotten tangled in the blanket, and that person just threw the blanket over themselves and got bit by a bat that was trapped in the blanket, and they didn't even notice it. They thought it was just a bug bite until they found the bat in the blanket and realized they had been bitten. Some people might not notice that they've been bitten if they've been camping or something. So we want to take instances where we see bats seriously. If it is a situation where you find one on the ground, it hasn't touched you yet, call someone. If it's during the day, get professional help before you try to touch it. And if you do have to touch it, don't touch it with your bare hands. And if you find a bat like in a blanket or something that was in contact with you, you also need to call someone because you might have been bitten and not known it. And if you find evidence that you had made contact with a bat unknowingly, that bat probably needs to be tested for rabies because a healthy bat would not be in that situation.
Bat boxes, getting started with that. Can you walk us through best if I want to do this properly, have bat boxes and make sure they don't get in my house? Those are the two big
Yeah.
things, right? Those are the questions I'm going to get asked. what's your recommendation? How do we do that?
So first and foremost, if you have them in your house, get a professional to come out to plan an exclusion plan for them. We don't exclude bats between in the spring, so I believe it's March or April to July 31st in August. During that time period, if that's a nursing colony, those baby bats cannot fly yet. If you try to exclude those bats during that time period, they'll get trapped in your house, and then you'll have a bunch of dead bats in your house, and nobody wants that. So we limit exclusion measures unless it's an emergency situation and a professional would determine that. We limit exclusion measures to the fall and the winter when mom and baby bat are ready to fly out and go find their winter colony. So that's first and foremost. If you do an exclusion measure, but you want to keep those bats around for your beneficial, insect eating, you can do a couple different things. You can build a bat house or buy one. When you're looking at different bat houses, there's a couple things you want to keep in mind. Number one, it's usually better to have multiple on a property than it is to just have one. Bats are really sensitive to temperature changes, and so they want options. So having one either back to back or one in a shaded area and one in a sunny area, so that way the bats can kind of decide where's our best place to go. So getting multiple boxes. Number two, if you go with the kind of traditional chamber style, which kind of looks like a lasagna, there's different layers in there. Two at minimum, preferably 3 or 4 chambers, 3 or 4 layers for them to be able to go in and out of, so they can kind of determine if it's too hot, they can go further in the house. If it's too cold, they can come out near the surface, so that way they can get sun. So multiple houses, chamber, rocket style houses are also very popular. Same thing with them, just making sure you have multiple of them. Bats need at least 10 feet, if not 15 to 20 feet of clearance under their house. So a pole is usually better than something like hanging it on a tree or putting it on the side of a house, but you can still do that as well. Just make sure that from the bottom of that house where they're going to be falling out, because bats don't take off like birds. They literally drop. That's why they hang upside down. They drop out and let gravity assist them to be able to take off. They need at least 10 feet, if not 15 to 20 feet of clearance between the bottom of that house and the ground. So those are options. Don't get discouraged if you put your house up and no bats come. Bats are really, really picky about their housing, and they don't tend to take to a new house unless something has happened to their old house. So if their previous nesting or roosting place filled up and population grew to the point where some of them had to get driven out and they have to go find a new place, or if it's like something like a house, like a human house that they got excluded from and they're trying to find a new place to go into, that's usually the time where they'll take new housing. And they also are kind of sensitive to smell. So if it's a brand new house, they might wait for it to some of that smell of newness to fade off of it before they come into it. If you don't have a space for a house, and you have a dead tree on your property and it's safe, and an arborist has said this is not a risk of it falling, a dead tree is a great option for a natural housing option for bats. So if you can keep that dead tree up and you don't want to put a pole up 20 feet up in the air to put a house on, a dead tree, a snag, is a perfect option for bats. Your other things that you can do if you don't want to put a house up, bat gardens, things that promote pollinators. So it doubles as a pollinator garden. Things that will attract moths and nighttime insects. So those are flowers that are usually white or red in a pollinator garden will attract those. So that will help attract bats to come eat those flying insects. And then you can technically put water out, but bats drink on the wing, so you need at least 10 feet of water. So if you have a pond or something, great. But if you are like, I don't have anything like that, but I really want to provide water, something like a really long water trough, 7 to 10 feet of water surface, so they can fly over, drink on the wing, and continue on, is a way to provide water for bats. So there's multiple different ways that people can support bats. And there's different resources with DNR, Department of Natural Resources, when it comes to different styles of bat houses. You can always contact your extension agent, and then they can just call me and I can help them, because I've built many a bat house in my day, and it can help figure out what's going to be our best option. And then we also have the Georgia Bat Working Group that works with DNR and with extension, and they are a fantastic resource.
Well, Carson, I really appreciate your insight, your expertise on this topic. I know it's something that's a little different than our normal topics on here, and somebody might be like, I didn't even think I needed to think about bats being a part of my operation or in my life in general. But
They're silent, they're shy, they just do their business, they do their job at night, and the fact that you don't notice them is the fact that they're doing good work. You know, they're not flashy, they're just out there at night doing their thing. And when you do notice them, don't freak out. They're fine. They're not going to get trapped in your hair. I know in the South we love high hair, close the higher the hair, the closer to God situation. They're not going to get trapped in it. They are really good at echolocating. They know exactly where you are, and they're not going to mess with you. They might be dipping around, but that's them just catching insects, so those insects don't come bother you. Oconee County, if you're in the area, on October 13th, it is Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. From 4 to 8, we have our second annual Bat Festival going on in Oconee County. It is free to attend, great for families. We have costume contests, we have trick-or-treating at the different booths, a lot of different education things about bats. We've got art displays by local artists about bats. We put up our new houses this year, so they are active, and we actually have bats up in them, which is super exciting. And this year, we are trying our first attempt at a bat walk in the evening from 7:30 to 8. We're hoping to be able to go out and actually listen for some bats that are on the property. So Oconee County, October 13th from 4 to 8 at Heritage Park in Oconee County.
well, thank you so much. I've learned I can't become a vampire. And Dolly Parton can also have bats and not have to worry about her hair getting messed up. So
Correct.
for both of those things, those are my takeaways. No, I'm just kidding. Well, thank you so much, Carson. We really appreciate it. We look forward to having you on here in the future again. Savannah, now that we've kind of wrapped up and Carson's finished up, you had a really cool upcoming event that we wanted to share before we wrap up. Do you want to speak on that forestry field day coming up?
Um, yes. So we do have a forestry field day coming up on at the Vidalia Onion Farm in Lyons, Georgia. That's going to be October the 29th, and it's from 9 to 3. It is registration required. We're going to talk about the impacts of the mill closures down in Savannah and Riceboro and a couple other ones we've had across the state. Going to talk about planting densities, comparing the different varieties of pines. A lot of great information. We're going to offer CFEs, CLEs, and pesticide credits. But again, registration is required, and so you want to contact the Evans County Extension Office for that.
And I'll throw in a few other little things that are coming up. Fairs are obviously in the works. So if you're in your local communities and you've got kids shipping off to Perry at the end of this week and the next week, y'all be thinking about them. Wish them good luck. They'll be showcasing all kinds of different animals and booths and things at the fair, and it's really exciting. If you have a chance to get down to Perry, the week after Perry finishes up, we'll have the Sunbelt Ag Expo down in Moultrie. And if you haven't been, that's probably one of my favorite things. It always falls on the week of my birthday, and I use that as a gift to myself when I get to go. I feel like it's kind of a vacation out of work, but also it's really fun, and I really enjoy being there. If you've never been before, definitely must see if you're in the ag world. I know it's a tough time of year for our producers, but if you can take a break and get away for a day, it is definitely worth your time. And they have grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that the Peanut Commission does, and they are smack your mama good. So I definitely recommend you going and getting you one of those. They sell out pretty well. They're not even sold; they're free. They hand them out pretty fast, so you need to go there at first thing in the morning and get you one for breakfast. It's a good start to your day at the expo. And this is a shameless plug for the expo. Mr. Chip Blaylock, if you're listening, this is for you. So I appreciate what y'all do at the Sunbelt Expo. Um, uh, Savannah, am I missing any other upcoming events?
I know of, but you can smack your mama, but I'm not trying. So I'm
Well,
not trying. Yeah, I'm not gonna smack your mama or my mama.
that's probably a smart idea. This is let's just do a public service announcement to finish this up. Do not smack your mamas. All right, that was just a figure of speech. But all right, well, if nothing else, we'll see y'all back on here on our next episode, and y'all keep tilling it like it is.
I see the world. There's still some good in it, and that good is you, girl.